What kind of art genre is your favorite? Are you into spectacular historical paintings, beautiful landscapes, or perhaps more into portrait painting? If you love to paint a beautiful bouquet of flowers a couple of 100 years ago, most people would not consider you a real artist. Why would you waste your paint and canvas on such a thing? It was considered much better to paint some significant scene from the Bible, from history, or mythology. A painting with a real story and message, not just something beautiful. There are 5 main art genres: history painting, portraits, landscapes, scenes from everyday life, and still lifes. And for a long time there has been a pretty clear order of importance among these themes, though that order was not always the same in every period or country. In 1667, the influential French art historian André Philibien announced on behalf of the court the following ranking of importance. He who paints perfect landscapes is above another who only paints fruit, flowers or seashells. He who paints living animals is worthier of estimation than those who paint only things that are dead and without movement. And as the figure of man is the most perfect work of God on earth, it is also certain that he who becomes an imitator of God by painting human figures is much more excellent than all the others. However, even though it is no small thing to make the figures of a man appear as if alive, and to give the appearance of movement to that which has none, nevertheless, a painter who only makes portraits may not pretend to honor accorded to the most learned. For that it is necessary to progress from the single figure to the representation of several together, to depict history and myth, the virtue of great men and the most elevated mysteries. And this view was very much in line with the art academies across Europe, as they were responsible for training new artists. Pretty much every artist was indoctrinated with this hierarchy. So the most important genre for several centuries was history painting, showing multiple people together to show a biblical, mythological or other historical event. These paintings could both be educational and teaching viewers about an important historical event, or they could have an allegorical message. From around the 13th till the beginning of the 17th century, religious paintings were considered to be the ultimate genre, not least because the church was the biggest and richest commissioner of these artworks. For example, Michelangelo would probably not have painted the story of the creation of the world on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel if the Pope would not have commissioned him to paint this. In the 15th and 16th century, however, there were also periods where the church was fine with more liberal themes based on mythology and more secular history, like Raphael's fresco of the School of Athens, showing the history of philosophy. And wealthy rulers were also eager to commission paintings of epic historical battles, a kind of propaganda to remind their people how powerful they were. The second most important genre was portrait painting. As Philibien stated, the figure of man was considered the most perfect creation of God, so if you are a good portrait painter, that earned you some respect. And today, the Da Vinci portrait of the Mona Lisa is arguably the most famous artwork ever created. And while this painting was created during the Renaissance, this genre really took off in the 17th century in the Netherlands, when they rejected Catholicism in favor of Protestantism. And unlike the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church was not going to commission any art. So artists had to be innovative and find new clients who were interested in new genres. And most of all, these new wealthy clients like portraits of themselves and their family. Rembrandt initially made a fortune painting such portraits, and artists like Frans Hals and Anthony van Dyck in England were very successful in painting such portraits, and they really took this genre to the next level. Until the 17th century, genre scenes, which are scenes from everyday life, were largely unheard of. Again, this was one of the new types of art that became popular in the Netherlands, which was perhaps the wealthiest country in the world during the 17th century, and where the new rich people were interested in having paintings for in their own house. Johannes Vermeer may be the most famous of these genre painters with his calming interiors. And unlike some of those history paintings, genre paintings were typically painted in a relatively small format so that people could hang them on their walls. But it would still take a while before genre painting became really accepted. In 18th century France, Rococo art became popular, and that can be seen as a form of genre painting, although it was often more a fantasy scene than one you could observe in daily life. It would only be in the 19th century that artists started to elevate the status of genre painting, when artists like Courbet and Millet would paint simple scenes from everyday life on very large canvases, like this Funeral in the Countryside by Courbet. Now, landscape painting was generally considered to be the fourth most important genre. If you would just paint a pretty view, like many of the Hudson River School artists in the United States did in the 19th century, it was not always appreciated. It was better to infuse the landscape at least with some kind of human presence or story. The French 17th century artist Claude Lorrain would be a master at that. He would paint a magnificent landscape, but then added a little story to that, like the mythological story of Ascanius shooting the stag of Sylvia, or this landscape with dancing satyrs and nymphs. And G.M.W. Turner would combine his land and seascapes with some history, like a famous ship, or the slave ship, and the eruption of the Vesuvius. But to understand the status of landscape paintings, you only need to look at the hard time that Impressionists had to get their works painted outdoors accepted. And then at the bottom of the list comes still life painting. Filling a canvas with inanimate objects was truly a waste of your time. It was perfectly fine to do this when practicing painting, like this hair by Albrecht Dürer, but if you took yourself serious as an artist, you should stay away from that. Unless you would combine it with some allegorical messages, then it would be a little bit better. That is what the painting of Vanitas works did. They would paint a still life including a skull or a timepiece to remind the viewer of the transience of life. Don't enjoy earthly pleasures, because tomorrow you may be dead and you will end up with nothing. 2 weeks ago I made a video about the trompe-l'œil effect in painting, and several artists in history did a tremendous job in showing their skills as a painter to make us believe that we are actually looking at something three-dimensional. But this did not earn them much praise. And still, many people today consider still life paintings as quite boring. For example, the works of Paul Cézanne may be among the most expensive ones in the world. Many people would not be lining up in a museum in front of one of his fruit baskets. Well, I hope you found this little overview of the hierarchy of the various painting genres interesting. Obviously, there's much more to say about this, and not every culture and time period considered these genres in the same order. And on top of that, many paintings do not fit neatly in one of these 5 buckets. But it does shed some light on what kind of genres were most popular in different time periods and why some artists have been much more popular over time than others. If you enjoyed this video, please support the channel by hitting the thumbs up button and subscribe for more art videos every week. Thanks for watching.